Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. A volleyball dad, Lay, can you please introduce yourself?
Good morning, live from Orlando, Florida, where my daughter is playing a volleyball tournament this week. And this is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 213. 213. Yeah, lots of sunshine. I'm looking at palm trees outside, lots of volleyball. And it's been relatively a slower week than usual, I think. But everything is setting up for the big events coming later this month. And I'm talking about number one, Tesla Robotaxi on
Mm.
Sunday. And then the next week, I believe it's June 26th, is the Xiaomi official Xiaomi YU7 launch, I guess.
They pulled it up.
Yeah. Uh, and I just tweeted there's been some updates on the Tesla Robotaxi event. Uh, the caveat is based on the pictures that have been shared on the social media is, first of all, there will be a safety monitor sitting on the right passenger seat. And it'll be geofenced. It's from 6 to midnight. So all of the qualifiers putting this as the so-called robotaxi initial early rider access, I guess, happening this Sunday. What are you looking forward to, in terms of how they do this? What are you looking to?
I'm expecting and I'm hoping for no accidents. The Tesla and the Tesla stands are making this out to be some really enormous technological feat, but we know that it's currently being done in a lot of parts of the world. California, Waymo talked about launching in New York City, and I would say that New York City is probably the closest thing to Asia streets or major cities, and so that's going to be pretty significant. Zoox is also looking at building tens of thousands of their robo taxis now. So, and Wave is also making waves. The biggest challenge for Tesla, Lay, is Uber, who has millions of downloads and subscribers on its platform, has partnered with what We Ride, with uh, Wave, with Waymo. So all those services now have all those Uber customers potentially whenever they go to the cities that those services are rolled out in. And Tesla, they have their drivers, their Tesla owners, but outside of that, they need to build up that install base in order to build, credibility, in order to build a competing service. And I guess I would ask you, do you think that Uber is their competitor, or do you think Waymo is their competitor, Neuro is their competitor? Because at the end of the day, if there's one app where you can use multiple services versus one app where you can use one service, what's better?
Well, we're definitely benchmarking against the Waymos, the Ponies, the Baidus, the WeRides for Tesla's Robotaxi. The only thing is they're moving from L2 to L4, whereas the other ones are the pure L4s. That's kind of how we compare. So the significance is really the ultimate goal for Tesla is really doing this. I say, Toro, the car rental, right? It's kind of like the Airbnb of car rental. But I think Tesla wants to move a step higher and become kind of the Airbnb of the autonomous vehicle. That means if I own a Tesla, I can put it into this uh, service. I
Sure.
think that's the ultimate aim, right? So that's the big question mark. And in order to get there, we do see that Tesla going the same route as what the L4 pure plays have done, because in China they go through these permit process where you have the safety drivers first in the driver's seat, and then second in the passenger seat, and then third completely they're gone, right? It's purely driverless, which in Baidu's case it is. They're pure driverless operation in China right now. And in order to get to that point, there's still a long way to go. I think that's kind of the framework.
One
And
one or a couple other things that I'll bring up, Lay, is you had mentioned earlier that these robotaxi companies went straight to level 4. So how clunky is it going to be to go from level 2 to level 4? And then, another thing is the older Teslas don't have the tops, the stack that's necessary likely to run a level 4 system. So without new products, Model 2, a really, really refreshed Model 3, Model Y, and with the current backlash in California and other parts of the United States with the Tesla brand, now we run into different issues. So the system could be great, but if they can't sell more vehicles with the newer hardware and software capabilities, then that could be a gating item
yeah,
for
so,
this future Airbnb of robotaxis, as you'd mentioned.
and it's the same things we've been saying over and over again, right? And if we do benchmark Tesla with the L4 pure plays, then the next questions we ask are, when are they going to get rid of the safety monitor? When are they going to expand the geofence in Austin? When are they going to expand into other cities? When are they going to expand into other parts of the world? And right, and if that process is longer or shorter compared to what Elon Musk has talked about on the earnings calls, previous earnings calls, right? We benchmark that process uh, against this kind of the proliferation of that service, and really become a viable commercial service like Waymo, like Baidu, like Pony. That probably is going to be a longer time frame going forward. Uh, but I think the ball is kind of rolling now, right? Um,
Well,
and
it's
in
still
China,
not
right?
it's still not Sunday
So
yet.
the right, the beer is still held. But I think the other interesting question is, do we have another competitor in China trying to do the same as what Tesla is doing now, going from L2 to L4 and putting the fleets into the Robotaxi network? So far, no, but it would be interesting if there's another competitor outside of the WeRide ponies that are doing this.
But in China, the robotaxi companies
It's,
are shoehorning level 4
yeah,
systems into not analog, but connected vehicles that don't have those capabilities. Like a Deep Route, was working with Great Wall. So this is where the China market is much different, much more different. Number one, number two, there are just many more competitors. The intelligent driving in China from the automakers is very robust. You and I have tried them all effectively, and in addition to that, they are becoming vertically integrated with Neo, Xpeng, Li Auto rolling out silicon to run their own system. So they are really, really creating an advantage that Western OEMs do not have.
Yeah, and also with the extreme competitive landscape in the door-to-door, point-to-point, parking space to parking space, uh, ADAS, level 2 plus 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 plus, what happens thereafter? Do the Neos, the Leotas, the Xpengs, they move over to the Tesla Robotaxi space? I mean, that'll be interesting
It
what
has to
happens.
be the play.
And do they
Xpeng,
become, yeah, do they
it,
become competitors of re-rides, ponies, and Baidu's, or somehow they're what could be working together? I mean, these are
and
whole questions.
and guess what? That just means the current and now the domestic EV players, the BYDs, the Chinese government, they're all saying it's a brutal price war. So it's not just us saying it; it's the calls are coming from inside the house. And Stella Lee said this is unsustainable in her interview with Tom McKenzie.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little bit rich coming from Stella and BYD that they are playing like these innocent bystanders, but they created the monster. BYD created that monster along with Tesla. So sorry, Tesla ignited the flame. BYD consistently pours gas on that flame. And so for Stella to say, we bring technology and then competitors undercut us 6 months later,
Mm-hmm.
I love Stella's ambition, but BYD plays a decent
Yeah.
role. And the last thing I'll say, Lay, is that so we're going to move from connected clean energy NEV price war to a intelligent driving uh, self-owned robotaxi service potentially price war in China
Yeah.
within 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And also, the other side of this going over to China is what Tesla's FSD in China. I think there's recently been a new development uh, that they could be somehow progressing ahead with offering these type of the L2 plus smart driving assist driving features. It's a plan for them currently in the Chinese market. They don't have the same capabilities. So what do they do there? What does China allow? Does not allow to compete? Um, that's
The
kind of
one thing that is helpful for the players in China, and I'm talking domestic and foreign, is that the policies are fairly consistent and they don't yo-yo like in the United States, where the Biden administration was very, very restrictive. Right or wrong, we're not here to talk about right or wrong. We're here about we're calling balls and strikes. We're the referees. From a Chinese connected software and then Chinese connected hardware. And then the Trump administration comes in and seems much more open to this grand deal, whereas the technology might be secondary to an economic deal. And we don't know, assuming that Trump doesn't try to force his way into a third term. We don't know what the next president's policies towards Chinese technology is going to be, and that's kind of the uh, the wild card that creates the uncertainty for legacy automakers to make certain commitments.
Yeah, and I think that the fanfare here is huge because anytime Tesla puts on a kind of a agenda or announcement or event, there's a lot of fanfare, there's a lot of expectations. And then I think in recent few events, what has happened is there's a bit of underwhelming that came out of it. So it'll be interesting to see, how this on Sunday, what what the pundits or what the stands are going to say, based on the ones that are going to experience this.
Well, I'll tell you that I've been told that the early users will be friendly to Tesla, first of all, and then second of all, it doesn't matter. The robotaxis could stop right in the middle of a demo. The Tesla stands will be Tesla stands, and that's not going to change. But if we want to be objective, then we'll have to wait probably 6 to 9 months when a broader customer base is allowed to download the app and use the service.
When you
And
and I
so,
can experience it, right? Then we kind of judge.
and there's probably going to be when and if we're able to download that app lay, the fine print is likely going to say you cannot post videos, blah blah blah. There's probably going to be a super restrictive uh, agreement if you want to use the service. That's what I'm anticipating.
Yeah, so for this early rider access, they are allowed to post photos and videos. So um, I'm sure we'll see tons of those by Sunday. But uh, the safety driver being there, the monitor being there, and not being there, I think makes a difference. And then I think I've said it before is when it's boring, it's probably doing the best job.
And
And yeah, but
I should look because I haven't been that curious, to be quite frank, because does launching in Austin in a limited geo-fenced area justify this $1 trillion or close to $1
no,
trillion valuation?
at least not yet.
Right. And there needs to be some acknowledgement that Tesla is overvalued because, again, this is not a big deal in the US, let alone China. So if they're not going to be the only and clearly best player in this space, why are they 100x more than a WeRide, a Pony, a Waymo? It doesn't make, well, Waymo I think is probably 20-30 billion dollar valuation, or maybe they're $100 billion, but again, we're talking almost 10x from a Tesla, right? So
Yeah,
and again, the analysts don't assign any value to the manufacturing and vehicle sales part of Tesla. It's only the autonomous stuff. So how do you square that circle?
right. Yeah, so we have again a lot of questions going into this. Uh,
Competition is good. I'm going to be very open minded about if and when I'm able to use the service. I don't think Nori is able to download the app because our friend Nori Shirozu lives down in Austin. But I do know there are one or two people
yeah, same
heading
here.
down to Austin.
Yeah, same here. I know some that live there, and ask them to kind of follow closely and maybe share some um, videos or.
And the last thing that I'll mention is, what's pricing going to be? Is it going to be cheaper than Waymo? Is it going to be about
Well,
the same price? So, because this is Tesla's first time, full stop, providing this service. And so, is it going to be, because also remember that Waymo is in Austin via the Uber app, and it's not as ubiquitous as in San Francisco and LA, and it's not direct. So sometimes you might get a Waymo, sometimes you might get a driver in Austin. And so it'll be funny because I'm sure there's going to be pictures of a street in Austin where you see a Waymo and then you see a cyber cab.
from
That'll be
a
pretty funny.
from a cost perspective, it's definitely should be lower, right? And at least comparable to the Ubers and the Waymos that we've taken, if not lower, and should be lower. The ultimate goal is right. It should be much lower because you're taking the human out of the equation, the driver out of the equation. So, but again, those are the things that as this progress forward that we kind of look at and benchmark against. Yeah.
And one thing that I just thought up, Lay, is that because this is going to be a service for everyone or who can afford it, it's not just going to be this first mover uh, customer that loves cutting edge technology like the early Tesla buyers were. They're likely going to need to be more open kimono about, you know, the information on accidents, on close calls, on remote control drivers in order for people like us to feel safe to get in these things. Because if they're trying to hide and be very secretive about the data and stuff like that, I don't know if that's going to attract the general public because Waymo seems much more customer friendly that way. And you and I have experienced the app and calling the car.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
process was awesome.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
seamless.
It's-
You got in, hey to. So
Yeah, there's so many components that go into this service, right? A complete service, not only the performance itself, but other parts of it. Um, so enough about Tesla Robotaxi. We said it was a slow week, but I just want to mention some of the milestones that you and I kind of touched upon and I tweeted is uh, so Lead Motor delivered the 800,000th vehicle this past week. Zeekr 500, half a million production. RoboSense delivered their 1 millionth ADAS LiDAR, not the Robotaxi LiDAR, ADAS LiDAR. Li Auto just opened up its 2,500th supercharger station in Disney World in Shanghai. Then Li Motor already has their 1,500th global store, that being in Hong Kong. So quite a few of these milestones that happened the recent week. Um, Interesting that Leap Motors is going to get to 1 million. A second smart EV startup that'll get to 1 million units cumulative after Li Auto. And speaking of Li Auto, they just shared some new pictures of the i6 that are launching in September. That kind of look like the closest I would say was kind of like a Toyota Stream. Is that the MPV name? Or the
I don't
Sienna?
know.
No, not the
Sienna.
Sienna. Sienna. Or the Venza, the earlier version of the Toyota Venza.
Right.
Right? It's kind of weird. Not a traditional SUV, not an MPV shaped. But coming before that is the i8, obviously, next month, right? So we said kind of the calm before the storm, the Robotaxi, and then the YU7. Yeah, uh, interesting milestones.
So the Li Auto BEVs that are going to be launching very soon, the i6 and i8.
i8 and i6. Yep.
I think they almost look like a Mega and a G7 had a baby.
Mega and the L series.
Yeah. And
Basically.
so uh, this reminds me, Lay, because you're talking about all these milestones. I'm reminded of the shared bicycles, the OFOs and the Mobikes, and what's that blue, the baby blue one? I forget what it's called.
Oh, it's
But
Hello Bike.
Hello, yeah. So remember in Beijing, when in Shanghai, when they all started, there's dozens of them. You'd go to a tier 2 city and there's a brand that you'd never seen before. Then you go to another city, there's a brand you'd never seen before. This kind of reminds me of that. And what happened with the e-bikes, and this is the I'm trying to square this circle, because you and I have heard about consolidation since day one. We've talked about that before. But in the shared bicycle space, that did happen.
That did happen, yes.
So now there's a Mobike and an OFO. You use the Meituan app or the Didi app, and you're good. And they're pretty ubiquitous. But so you talk about all these milestones, but I still feel that in 10 years, 3/4 of these companies, 80% of these companies, 90% of these companies that you and I have spoken about at least once, twice, three times, most of them aren't going to be in these foreign markets. They're barely going to have a presence in China. And so I do believe what that professor said. I forget his name, but there's a conference a few months ago, and he was like, the number is 2 million units, a minimum 2 million
Right.
units,
I think
or you're out of the
Alphonse
market.
he even said, right, 2 to 3 million units, 7 players doing that, right? We're still far away from that, but and speaking, right, speaking of Xiaomi, they just got land for potentially the third plant. And think about their long-term ambition of trying to be the top 5 global automaker, which means they need all the capacity that they need. And it's only the three plant together probably is only 450,000 capacity initial. That's not nearly as enough. So they're kind of under capacity when we talk about this overcapacity problem.
And with those companies, so there was I don't know if you saw that, there's this Bloomberg article that said Gasgoo, Gasgoo, that
Yeah, sure.
research,
Mm-hmm.
they said that 2024 utilization for China was 49%. So and remember that brand Haima,
Mm-hmm.
the GBA startup Haima? They had a factory in South China that was at a utilization rate of 2% or
Yeah.
1.5%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that should be concerning extremely to the Chinese government. And you hear about these green fields, like the Xiaomi factory you mentioned. Why aren't they just converting ICE capacity to EV capacity? We know why, because the local governments will incentivize to build new factories.
Sure.
And so it
Sure.
doesn't make sense
Sure.
to invest in a brownfield site. But the 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 one thing that's really important is that outside of BYD, no one has really announced commitments to manufacture outside of China. There are a number of companies that are shipping kits. And we know current trends say that the door to export is that opening is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay. BYD is getting ahead of it by effectively announcing manufacturing in 8, 9
Yeah.
different locations. Okay, a combination of kits and a combination of complete manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to slow them down, and so their march to 10 million. I think you and I believe that they'll get there, but it's not going to be the last 6 or 7 years of BYD where
Yeah.
they went
That,
from
yeah.
700 to 5 million.
That's exactly what I told Sharissa from my NPR this morning. We talk about kind of the price war. Yeah. Um,
And so,
mm,
so when you think of these big bold claims from a Xiaomi, because again, they're not even at two products yet, and they want to be a top five player. That means, and always keep in the back of your mind, if you're listening and viewing, the China market's by far the number one market. Then you go to United States, then you go EU. The United States is about 25 or 20% of the total global vehicle sales. Take that piece of the pie out. Your path to 10 million is really, really tough.
Mm.
So,
That's the last
so,
frontier.
so
Until you're in that last frontier, can
it's
you
not
take the 10
impossible.
million?
It's not
Right,
impossible,
right.
but
But
where do you pick up? I'm saying chunks of volume. I'm saying 1,000,000 units, 1.5 million units, 800,000. Where do you pick up those? There's only a handful of countries that will give you that type of volume, and that means if you're in the top one of the top 10 countries, so India is the fourth or fifth largest, and I want to separate regions from countries, right?
yeah,
EU is a region with 28 countries. And so you have to sell into those individual countries.
sure.
The United States, you can create a national strategy and then launch it locally. Whereas in Europe, you need different languages, you need different culture. So it's much more difficult from that standpoint than entering the United States. And if India is a 4.5 million unit market, and you want to extract 1 million units from India, you need to control 25% of the market. Is
It's tough.
Tata and
It's tough.
is Tata and Mahindra going to allow you to do that? There's no freaking way. So that's where the fun part begins for us, I think, Lei, because we understand the products, the brand, the positioning in China, how they're going to evolve those. And the other thing that's really important to me that I'm grabbing my popcorn is how they will evolve their brand message, because Xpeng has kind of shifted a little bit because they're providing technology and affordable mass market vehicles, but does that play in Europe where technology is not probably a top 3 or 4 attribute for
Yeah.
vehicle purchase?
And then we've seen NIO kind of recently trying to expand into some of the additional European markets, working with kind of the one player, one dealer partner per country style that they've talked about. And now Firefly is heading over. How that will fare, right? Uh, yeah,
One thing that I have a good friend of mine that lives in Sydney, and he feeds me information. He said that Zeekr is really struggling. Xpeng is really struggling in Australia, and so a market that only imports vehicles, they don't mass produce any vehicles, and a huge opportunity for a Chinese EV maker to pick up, let's say, chunks of sales volume. You can't make those types of mistakes when you launch into a country like Australia, because you probably aren't going to get a second chance.
yeah,
And so, for the folks at Zeekr and at Xpeng, hopefully you're listening, because this dude knows what he's talking about. Um, I won't hold it against him because he's from Melbourne, but I have a few good friends that are from Melbourne. But I thought Melbourne was a cool town. I thought Sydney was better, but I digress. Anyways,
yeah,
but and that the reason I bring that up, Lay, is because I think you and I with BYD feel like they're this force that will get to where they want to go because of the price, because of the products, and because they're already in so many markets.
yeah, yeah,
And with their entry into so many markets, they probably have a set process, rinse and repeat into these markets. Whereas you look at Xpeng, they pressed reset, and Neo slowly. And so getting to the multiple millions for an Xpeng or a Neo, we have to question whether they can do that.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Other than that, I think the other one that we kind of touched upon a little bit is last Sunday. This major news dropped that Luca De Mayo moved over to Kering, the luxury group uh, that has Balenciaga, YSL,
Gucci.
Gucci, right?
That's
So
the
that's an
crown jewel.
interesting move, but I think yeah, it's. I just feel like he's kind of like, my job is done at Renault Group, and I'm looking for a new challenge. And somebody else, please take my baton, and we go from there. And he turned Renault around during the pandemic. Uh,
So
so
there's
that
two reasons Renault was struggling. The Carlos Ghosn
uh, right.
debacle,
Mm-hmm.
and you can also point to the tragedy with Sergio Marchionne dying and almost holding FCA hostage for a few years as they were finalizing the Stellantis deal. So Renault and Stellantis, I feel, had similar challenges because their CEOs were not focused, and then Renault got into the whole COVID thing, and Luca, he's only been in the position for 5 years, so kudos to him.
Yeah, I think this smart guy, and the China factor is a few things he did in his tenure. One is, I don't know if people know this. Renault set up a R&D entity in China, even though Renault is not that producing. They're, they're not
Well,
producing. They're producing some vehicles, but they're right. They're out of China, but they have an R&D entity in China.
isn't that due to our friend Wei Minso
No, I think it's different from,
earlier?
yeah, it's earlier. And then
Okay.
second, what they did with that horse powertrain joint venture, kind of working with Geely, and then also I think Geely has taken over their South America entity. I remember that there was a agreement signed last year, right? So these are the moves that he made. That even though they're not an active player, no longer active player in China, but China is still, to him, I think, is an important piece of the puzzle, and that's kind of his legacy that he's left behind. And um, yeah, I think the auto industry actually lost quite a smart star CEO. I mean, right?
Oh, he brought
When we
Sissel
were,
too.
yeah,
He's
we
such a
when we were at
smooth,
the
smooth guy, huh?
Paris Auto Show, right? The new Macan
Five.
5, right? These next generation of products, they're online. They're ramping. So that's his kind of the
And Renault is
legacy.
effectively the national brand of France.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. And I'd written about this a little bit in the newsletter, and I'm gonna counterpoint to your point. I did say that, hey, maybe Luca is kind of done, and he feels like he's accomplished what he wanted to with Renault. The other part of me, the other side of that coin, lay is maybe he sees the Chinese players entering Europe as kind of the best that they're going to get at this point, and he didn't see anything but more competition and more challenges, especially because he knows what the product portfolio is for the next 5 years for Renault and Alpine and Dacia. So
Yes.
I almost feel that there's a combination of that. Hey, I've done a good job. I'm ready to take on a new challenge, but also I see what the challenges ahead are for Europe, and not having any strong sales presence
Yeah.
in China is also a huge constraint for him or
And
Renault.
he's going into an industry which is not having an easier time because of China, or
Carrying
despite of China,
carrying
right?
is,
Right.
I think their share price was down 60 or 70%.
So I
So
mean, if he can turn that around, then he's some kind of CEO, right? That's
Yeah. And kudos to Pritam, who is the son of the founder of Caring, for looking outside of the luxury goods
yeah,
space. And there was a Reuters article. Nick Carey had written it. Friend of the show, Nick Carey, uh, who pointed out one Renault guy and one Stellantis guy, two Frenchmen, uh, who as the likely candidates. But I'm going to throw out a dark horse, man. I'm going to throw out Wei Ming So as a dark horse.
yeah. He's been under the radar. He's been low key. But you know, yeah.
And I haven't heard anything about Bianca. So
I don't know. I don't hold any hope for that. But
yeah, me neither. But so for those that don't know, Wei Ming So was the highest ranking and board member of Volkswagen Group. And he got passed over for the head of Volkswagen Group China and ended up leaving because Luca De Meo is also a Volkswagen Group alum. And I think Luca poached him to become the Renault China head.
hmm, yeah,
And so he's still currently the Renault China head. And 3 or 4 years ago, he had launched a Renault and GAC backed startup called Bianca. We haven't heard anything about it. We actually did some work for Bianca back in
they're
the
trying to
day.
produce in Hong Kong. The last I
Yeah,
remember, set up a facility, which is weird. But
it's almost like building in Arizona.
yeah.
So, um, do I have anything? Let me
So
let me
that's all
take a
I have.
quick look.
I know it's been relatively slower week. And yeah,
So, some administrative. I posted part two of the roundtable SPX. Thank you for watching both of them. He seemed to be um, he seemed to enjoy the episodes, so we'll try to do more of those roundtables. And the priority for me doing those roundtables was really trying to expose. I think we have a pretty good mix of Western and European and Eastern um, listeners and followers and watchers. And Jill is very diligent. Ethan is also grinding it out, and Ed,
the,
obviously, for the FT being in Shanghai, I wanted to highlight people on the ground, and
yeah,
we wanted to highlight. And so that's why we invited them.
and
Not
yeah.
just because they're super knowledge or because they're on the ground, but they're also super knowledgeable. I have a ton of respect for all three of them.
Yeah,
So
it's just not only in terms of the people on the ground, but the breadth of their perspectives are different, are diversified, are diverse. That's why we had them, right? Um,
yes,
yeah. So
a Chinese woman,
thought provoking,
oh,
even
oh,
questions,
West,
right? You know, yeah.
yeah, and yeah, a Chinese woman working for a tech media outlet,
An American
American man who's driven
in China,
almost every car, and then a
uh,
Kiwi who's covered multiple industries and is now in
for a
Shanghai.
British outlet,
Yeah,
let's say.
so
And
um, that's all I have too. Let me check our messages here. Bear with me. So no messages on LinkedIn, which is cool. Okay.
hi to anyone that has said hi. I think some pop-ups I saw.
Yeah. So Jeffrey's on, as always. And this is what he says about LiDAR. Diane is back on. So it's like consistently Diane, Jeffrey, and SPX like to post things, which is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, here's Jeffrey again. Okay.
To do or not to do is the same. Okay.
So Diane says, I thought Zeker would do well. So Diane, I was told that the Zeker products are not a good market fit, and the pricing is not where it needs to be. Diane also says Renault is working with South Korea also, so Renault killing it, I guess. Um, she also says the roundtables have been good. So first of all, thank you. You know, I know that was almost 2 hours of your time, SPX and Diane. So great that you could watch
Appreciate
that
the
stuff.
support. Appreciate the support.
We'll try to get more of that stuff out. But that's all I have, man. So we're letting
Next week,
class out early. We're giving you
yeah,
back 10 minutes, everyone.
yeah. Next week we'll have more to talk about because 27 that the Robotaxi would have launched, YU7 would have debuted, hopefully. Um, and
So
then
there are pictures lay in the production or manufacturing yard of U7s already built.
yeah, that's always been the plan. You know, when it's launched, the deliveries start soon after, rather than a prolonged time in between. That's always
Which
been
is
the plan.
key.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So we can start
So,
counting the sales starting from July, basically. 6 months. Well, yeah, 6 months
and,
of
and I
U7.
think it's prudent because they want, now that they double their product, things will get more complicated. And they're going to need to manage manufacturing the SU7 and the U7 together and balance out lead times for each of those
Yeah.
orders. So, anyways,
You know, one
everyone,
number I
go
would
ahead. Sorry.
estimate for the U7, can they do 100,000 U7s in the 6 months remaining of this year? If they do that, that's incredible. That is incredible.
Well, that would mean that
That,
they're they're selling about 15,000 units a month, right? For the next 6 months.
that's unheard of. I mean, for
And so that means that they would need to be working extremely closely with their suppliers.
yeah,
And this, with the dark cloud of suppliers not getting paid for 120 days. And so I thought this through a little bit, Lay, and I'll just leave the show with this thought. It only takes, and it could be a supplier that doesn't have an important part. It just takes one supplier to screw everything up. And
because last year Xiaomi did over 130,000 units in 9 months. So
so it's not out of the question.
it's not out of the question they can do 100,000 U7s in 7 months, in the 6 months.
Well, so
Uh,
but remember, they probably need to build as many Su7s as they do U7. So if you're
that's
saying
part of
100,000
work.
units
Yeah,
in 6
yeah,
months,
yeah.
well, let me ask you this. Let me put it this way. How many total units?
Well, they said
Su7 plus U7
they said the target is 350,000. That's still in place. So
for the
roughly, right,
by the
100,000.
end of 2025.
Yeah, 100,000 U7s and 250,000 Su7s. That's kind of my look at it.
So the utilization rate at that factory is going to be over 90% easily.
Yeah, yeah, because it will be produced at the second factory.
So
So
when they say things like that, that means that their tooling was ordered weeks ago or months ago. That means that their purchase orders and their manufacturing planning schedule was already shipped out to the suppliers, and the sourcing people are talking to the suppliers on a weekly basis. How are we looking? How are we looking? How are we looking? Do you have any challenges? Do you have any issues? And then any quality issues, the sourcing guys and the supplier quality guys are going straight to the supplier factory and trying to um, straighten all those challenges out so that when products ship, they call it linear supply. It means that there are no kinks, and because what you don't want to do is start the line, stop the line, start the line, stop the line. So I would also guess that they are probably hoarding parts in order to launch production pretty smoothly. So they probably have a lot of parts sitting in Beijing, waiting to get installed into the U7s that are about to get um, added to the line. So, anyways, now we're getting too wonky. Everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Lei, good luck to your daughter, and thank them for
Thank you.
spending time in the other room.
They're having
and
breakfast, so.
and so
And
we
then
will.
I will talk to you next week from Phoenix. Even hotter place.
Hopefully, having tried out a Waymo.
I would definitely try the airport Waymo. I would definitely try to,
Is that a Waymo app or is that an Uber app?
Waymo?
Okay, so
So, because
hey man,
Phoenix Airport is not that far from the city center.
okay.
So
Oh, so Waymo goes to the airport
yes,
in Phoenix.
yes. So that'll
Okay.
be interesting if I can. Yeah.
All right. Hey, have a good weekend, Lei.
All right, you too, man.
We'll see everyone.
Bye bye.
Oh.
What'd you